Good morning, everyone. I think it is. Good morning. Okay.
Good morning.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us and for being patient as we got started a few minutes late. So welcome to the Future of Work Town Hall. My name is Karin Cardella. I'm the Public Information Officer for Police and Public Safety.
And I'm Liz Graham, and I'm the Executive Director at the Thurgood Marshall Law Library. Karin and I were also both co-chairs of the Workplace Flexibility within this task force.
Absolutely. So we're going to get started. First, we just want to thank the Future of Work Task Force members. There were 30 people, 31, 30 on the task force who put in over a year of work into this. Our project managers, Elisa Medina and Patty Hoffman. The chairs are AVP Malika Monger, who's here with us, as well as AVP Diane Forbes-Berthoud. And our executive sponsors here are Provost Roger Ward and Senior Vice President Dawn Rhodes. So I will turn it over to Provost Ward.
Don't applaud yet. Let's see how this goes. Good morning. I am Roger Ward, Provost and Executive Vice President. And as Karen said, I'm one of the executive sponsors of this work, this very important work. My colleague, the other executive sponsor, Senior Vice President Dawn Rhodes, she's our Chief Business and Finance Officer. We have been tag teaming these. Dawn, unfortunately, at the last minute is unable to join us, but we will push through and do our best version of her. Between all of us here, I think we have a pretty good handle on the material. Before we jump into the substance of why we're here to present the findings and the recommendations, I want to certainly acknowledge the work of the task force, its leadership, Liz, Karen, Malika, and everyone who's been involved in the process for the level of engagement, the quality of the feedback, and the careful thought that has gone into the recommendations that we'll discuss today. Likewise, I want to also acknowledge the efforts of university leadership in embracing this initiative, as represented today by, I see Dean Postmos from our School of Social Work here. I see Dr. Peter Murray here from our Senior Vice President for Information Technology here as well. Both Peter and Judy are part of the university's executive leadership team, and we're also involved in discussing the recommendations and offering some of the feedback that we will present today in terms of the leadership's perspective on each of the recommendations. And I want to thank all of you for continuing to be engaged in the process as we try to navigate this new world order as it relates to how we work. UMB, we have a very distinctive set of core values. We have our mission that we are very committed to. But we also want to be responsive, consistent with one of our core values, well-being and sustainability, and that speaks about belonging. We want to also be responsive to the staff in particular, but our faculty as well, in terms of how they work and perform their roles and responsibilities here at the university. And it's trying to balance individual needs with the greater needs of the university and making sure that we are, in the end, able to execute on our mission. A big piece of which is making sure that our students, who are, for the most part, given that this is not an online institution, in person, if not here on campus taking classes, certainly in the clinics and different learning environments in and around campus, on and off campus as well. So again, it's all about striking the appropriate balance. And I think a lot of the recommendations and the discussion that will follow hopefully demonstrates that a lot of thought and effort has gone into doing just that. Thank you all for your engagement. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. All right, so we just want to go through the agenda of what we're going to cover today. First, Malika will talk about the charge and the scope of this task force. And then Liz and I will summarize the committee's work over the past year and a half, 2 years. I feel like it gets longer every time I say, 15 years. No, I'm just kidding. Then we'll go through the recommendations. We have it split into 6 themes, and then there's 14 recommendations under those themes, and then there's 58 sub-recommendations. So it's a huge body of work. We will not be able to cover everything today. It is all on the website. You can read it all. So we're going to highlight the recommendations that we think will be most meaningful and generate the most conversation here in the room. And then it is a town hall. We have plenty of time left for questions. If you're in the room, please just raise your hand and Brittany will bring you the microphone so that people online can hear your question as well. And Alex will be moderating the questions online. You can ask them either yourself or Alex will take some questions anonymously if you'd like to ask your question that way. So with that, I will turn it over to Malika.
I just wanted to put out, Dawn is on. She has joined. She didn't trust us to do it justice.
I know, because y'all didn't see me over here like, writing underlines and trying to write feverishly to sub in. So Dawn, if you hear me, thank you so much for being able to join us today. So let me just say a couple of things. So when we started down this road, we wanted to make sure that the task force was a representative group of employees who were looking at the information that they were tasked with. So we had lots of representation. We made sure that there was representation from all of the schools and units. Great minds, rich discussion, the information that was there. And so as Karen alluded to earlier, we had about 30 members that were then appointed to work on the task force. And they were really charged with looking at the changing needs, right, of our workforce. We know that we're kind of in this hybrid work environment. There's been lots of concerns about like, where do we go from here, right? And we had a consultant come in and give us a report. They have reviewed, I think that you used the word hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages of information, looking at best practices, looking at what other universities are doing. We had listening sessions. We did surveys just to pull together the information so that our task force can really be informed when they were making the recommendations. And so we asked them to look at 3 areas. One was work flexibility, and that's not just we remote work, because we know that that's kind of where our minds go often when we think about work flexibility, but it's also the how, the when, the hours, all of that of how we work, being flexible in our thoughts about work and how and when and how we work, right? And where. So, and also the employee value proposition. So what sets the university apart from other universities, right? Why do people and why should people want to come here and work, right? So looking at those areas. And then number 3 was well-being, right? How do we look at the different areas of looking at the whole person? And you'll hear Karen really hit on that later on, not just the physical, not just the mental, but when we look at our employees, the total person and how we can support that as a university. So the task force presented a list of recommendations. So there were 14 major recommendations with 58 sub-recommendations, very comprehensive. And if you have been able to go on the website, or if you haven't and you'd like some light reading, you're welcome to look at all 168 pages of the report. So they were able to present the report first to our executive sponsors, Senior Vice President, Dr. Don Rhodes, as well as Provost Ward and Dr. Gerald. That was then followed by a presentation to our Dean and Vice President group. Lots of rich discussion, lots of great questions. And then we met from there. Dr. Gerald appointed a subgroup of the deans and vice presidents. And thank you. We have two of our members. So Dean Postmus was on that work group, as well as Dr. Murray from SITS, who was on that work group as well. And
I neglected to, I missed, Dean Wong.
he was not
No,
on the.
but Dean Wong is also, is Dean of our graduate school. He's a member, should probably get on mic for folks online. I just wanted to, I neglected to also recognize that in the audience present today is the Dean of our graduate school and Vice Provost for Graduate Education, Dr. Kenneth Wong, and he too is a member of the executive leadership team that reviewed the recommendations and offered feedback. And because I was off mic when I was on mic when I said Dr. Rhodes wouldn't join us today, but was off mic when I said she will, I just want to make sure that our virtual audience knows that Dawn was able to join us, so you'll have the benefit of her wisdom as well.
Thank you and welcome. I know Dr. Wong is newer to our university, so welcome. So joined with Dr. Postmus and Dr. Murray, we also had Dr. Forbes Bethoud, who was on the work group, who I believe has joined us virtually, and Dean Ogbalou from the School of Nursing, and then myself and Karen, who is our Senior Vice President's Chief of Staff, Karen Park. Am I missing anybody? I think I got everybody. Oh, and of course, Dawn. We were led by Senior Vice President Dawn Rhodes. And so, and then we were asked to look at one or four areas in looking at all of the recommendations. So whether we support, not support, more research is needed, or if it's something that we are already supporting. So when you see the report online, you will see that response report from the deans and vice presidents. And so today, what we're going to do is walk through a summary of the recommendations. There would be no way that we could get through this in 2 hours if we walk through all of the recommendations. But we will do a summary of the ones that were most important, that we had the most conversation on. And so with that, I will turn it back over to our co-chairs. And let me just say on that, you know, we had these 3 different work groups that worked on the areas. So can you speak? Shanice, I'm sorry, but there's no mic. So Shanice, who is also one of our co-chairs from our wellbeing committee. I know Jill, I'm really surprised that I don't see Jill here because she has been,
She might be online.
I was gonna say, she has been here for all of them, very involved. So Jill Hamilton was also one of our co-chairs, along with Aisha Samples and Laura Kozak, that's right. So wonderful co-chairs are, again, when I say the task force was really involved, led by our co-chairs, they have done an awesome, awesome job. So thank you.
All right, so I get the very fun task of trying to summarize about a year and a half of work. So how did we get from the kickoff in July of 2022, when this committee first started, to now? And so in that first meeting, we were told to think big. We were told to lean into our collective wisdom. We were told to think about the different perspectives we all brought. To Malika's point, these task force were incredibly diverse in terms of functional responsibilities, in terms of what schools they were from. And we were also told to really think of the core principles. And so when I say we arrived at these recommendations, and I will repeat it once again, that is 14 high-level recommendations and 58 sub recommendations. You will be tested after this. You know, we recognize that we were asking for basically a combination of 3 things: time, resources, and in some cases, a shift in priorities. And I'm not exaggerating when I say we went through hundreds and hundreds of pages of recommendations that these committees put together to arrive at these kind of 14 high-level recommendations. And so right from the beginning, once we kind of get into the more substance of the themes, you'll see how we were influenced by the core principles. And really, it came down to us like kind of three big questions as we were working through all of this. What was the university doing well? How could we build on that? And then how do we make sure that the foundations we're building are sustainable? So I want to kind of echo some of the sentiments we've already heard from Roger and Malika about the level of engagement we received. And so in fall of 2022, we put out a fairly large survey and we received almost 1,900 responses. We then went on a series, and it was a series. I want to say there was at least 6 listening sessions, where, we had thousands upon thousands of engagements with people, whether it was in person at these listening sessions, online, the questions you submitted. And I really can't stress enough how important it is. We listened, we heard you, and the committee really wanted to make sure that we represented those thoughts that you brought to us. And so when we look back on that survey, which again was fall of 2022, 77% of the people who responded at the time said they were engaged in some level of remote work. When we kind of drill down into those numbers, 61% of those respondents were doing somewhere between 2 and 5, and just about under a third were doing somewhere between 3 and 5. And so again, we just want to thank you. I've seen several of you at all of these town halls as well. So again, just thank you for your continued engagement in this process. Here's what we heard. This isn't going to be a surprise to most people. Competitive pay were some of the things that our staff was interested in. Feeling valued, feeling included and respected. Work-life balance. Again, it would be remiss of me not to say this on the week of wellness, that this was something that obviously employees were concerned about. And equity. And we're going to come back to this word equity a lot when we talk about workplace flexibility. So yeah, these should not be a surprise to anybody. But as we started to drill down, we really started to see some more nuance when it came to these. And so when we talk about value and respect, for a lot of people that meant autonomy, right? The ability to be able to manage their teams in the way that they thought best. When it came to equity, especially in terms of workplace flexibility, we heard a lot about concerns about, remote work and flexible work policies that maybe didn't take into account the whole person. And so as we delve into the themes, you'll hear us talk a bit more about that. But ultimately, what we as a committee understood was that what we were doing and the recommendations we were making, it was always going to be a moving target. There was no one size fits all for the recommendations that we came up with.
You'll see us doing this little song and dance. So as Liz mentioned, that was a perfect segue. There isn't a one size fits all to these recommendations. We heard again repeatedly that employees felt that workplace flexibility was distributed unfairly. One of the things that we heard was, I work a similar job to so-and-so, but I have to be here 5 days a week and they can work remotely 5 days a week or some variation of that. We as a committee spent a significant amount of time examining how we could more fairly distribute flexible work, but it's really complicated, right? Because we have employees who have to be here, researchers, clinicians, or emergency personnel. And these areas have diverse needs. So we tried to make our recommendations not as a one size fits all, but rather as a way that would empower our employees and our supervisors to make the best decisions for their units, given their functional needs. And what this means is that supervisors and employees need to work together to determine what their unit's needs are. Are there opportunities to increase flexible work, maybe during certain times of the year? Are there creative scheduling opportunities? Maybe you come in earlier or stay later. Or could flexibility mean something other than remote? I know Malika mentioned we often think flexibility means remote work, but it's how, when, or where you work. So you'll see that we recommend additional training for supervisors, especially of those who supervise remote and virtual employees. But collaboration is really a big thing that we'll come back to again and again throughout this presentation. We also recognize that there's a lot of incredible in-person work being done here at UMB. And UMB is an anchor institution here in West Baltimore. So these were all considerations that we had to make as guiding principles with these recommendations. So the bottom line of all of that is that the Future of Work Task Force believes that UMB can support both flexible work, including remote work, and maintain its role as a world-class research institution committed to in-person education, and that these are not mutually exclusive ideas, but really that they can work together in concert. Now, say it with me, there's 14 high-level recommendations, 58 sub-recommendations. We wanted to put this ridiculous slide up here just to show this is only the executive summary. So this is the overall look at those high-level recommendations and sub-recommendations. But the full report is available on the website, as we've mentioned. The QR code is there at the bottom, as well as the link. I would highly recommend that you enjoy that 168-page document. It was a labor of love by all of us. And it does include a lot of sub-recommendations that we won't talk about here today. So there is more in this document. I can't say it enough. I would highly recommend that you go look at the whole document. So we are now going to shift into those themes, recommendations, and then have Senior Vice President Dawn Rhodes respond to those. This is the key to the leadership responses. It will be at the top of all the slides, so you don't need to memorize this. The green check mark in the box is something that UMB has said that they are already supporting. The blue check is that UMB supports the sub-recommendation. The red book is that more research is needed. And then the black X is that UMB does not support this sub-recommendation. So I will turn it back over to Liz to kick us off.
I'll just say, because this is probably my last opportunity, given that this is the last town hall, when we talk about that 168-page report, how much work Karin put into the written product of this. And so I'm just really proud that I get to present up here with her about this work. But with that, I will kick us off with our first theme, which really is about maintaining and expanding on the existing success that we've already had at UMB. And so when we talk about that because it's important for us to continue to build on these successes so that we remain an employer of choice and that we're able to not just hire, but retain the best and the brightest. And so with recommendation 1, this really was the answer to the question, how do we ensure equitable access to flexible work schedules for all UMB employees? And the key word here, and we'll come back to it a lot, is equitable. Not equal, because our committee understood that UMB employees just have a diversity of roles and responsibilities. We also heard that there was a lot of frustration, that there were these blanket policies, that people were being told things without adequate justification. And so our approach to navigating this reality was to recommend kind of 3 buckets of employees. Those who are here 100% on site by virtue of their functional responsibilities, those who maybe do have the opportunity to work 100% remote, but really where majority of the employees fell was somewhere in the middle, right? These hybrid employees. And so for hybrid employees, our approach was they can work anywhere between 0 to 5 days. That was the recommendation. And you're probably wondering, 0 days, Liz? What do you mean by 0 days? What do you mean by 5 days if they're supposed to be hybrid? It means that there are a number of factors that go into determining when someone is able to take advantage of flexible work. It means, what jobs do you do? What time of year is it? We have, faculty here, we have staff here, we have people who work in finance. So maybe for finance people, fiscal year start, fiscal year close, those are really busy times. It's really important for them to be here on site. Maybe for those who deal more with student activities, it's really important for them to be here on site 100% of the time during something like orientation. It's not just the time of year, it's staffing levels. Maybe you have a smaller team. Maybe, you have vacancies on your team. And so, engaging in flexible work is a bit more difficult because you're not fully staffed. These are all things that you have to take into account. And again, it goes back to the kind of one size fits all. We could never come up with a recommendation that said everybody should get, XYZ of flexible schedules. It just would never work. And so for recommendation 2, we tried to acknowledge that, hey, this was already happening in a lot of spaces. You saw it with the survey results. People were already engaged in flexible work. So let's continue to provide that flexibility. And really at the core of this recommendation was this idea that employee flexibility, that employee productivity and supervisor flexibility were not mutually exclusive. And so, again, I hate to keep on harping on this, but we read a lot of information. We did a lot of research. We talked to a lot of people. And everything we said, everything we saw pointed to this idea that when you were flexible, people were more productive, people were more creative, people wanted to be innovative. And so recommendation 2 simply encourages the university to continue down that path. But we also felt it was important, and this is something that's probably going to come up. We've received a lot of questions about it throughout this entire process. At one point, one of our recommendations talked about the university should continue to support flexible work unless there is evidence-based harm. So what did we really mean by that evidence-based harm? Simply put, I'm going to make it just, kind of bring it right down to the foundation, was that supervisors needed to have a good reason for denying flexible work schedules. What those reasons looks like, we'll talk about. You'll hear us talk about it a lot over the next hour. But that was really at the core of this idea of what it means when we talk about evidence-based harm. And with that, I will gladly hand it over to Dawn.
Good morning, everyone. Let me add my thank you and appreciation to everyone who was involved in bringing us to this point and all of the countless hours of research and work and writing, etc., discussion. We couldn't be here without the collaborative effort of all of you. And I also want to thank the leadership subgroup that worked so hard to synthesize things and present a product and document that the rest of the leadership team could respond to and get behind and support. So with slide number, this particular slide and 1.2 and 2.5, campus leadership supports both of these. And that's evidenced by the fact that we're already, both of these things are already happening in several units across campus. And you're going to hear us say this multiple times as you have already. So we hope it really sticks. It's important to know that there are many variables that factor into whether it's appropriate to work remotely and how often. It's not just the fact that you can, but is it appropriate? And as it's already been stated, those variables include vibrancy, a sense of community and belonging, and the operations of the units and what time of year, etc. So deans, vice presidents, and your supervisors are charged with taking these variables into consideration when reaching decisions to permit hybrid. Next slide, please. Here, recommendation 1.1, evaluating all staff positions across the university is too large a scope to be coordinated centrally. So leadership does support this being done by the deans and the vice presidents at the level they deem appropriate, and they will receive those instructions. The supervisor should be able to explain the rationale for the classification a position falls under, whether it's fully remote, fully on-site, or hybrid. That's one of the things that we learned. People really want to understand the rationale behind decisions are made. But again, I want you to hear this. If a position is deemed that it can work 100% remote, that does not automatically mean that it will. The supervisor needs to be allowed to make the best operational decisions for the units, and it has to conclude our university commitment to campus vibrancy and vitality and the sense of community and belonging that I just talked about. 2.3, more research needs to be done on this one. There are several current leave options available for employees with short and long-term illnesses, which may or may not offer remote work and flexible scheduling opportunities. We must do a better job of communicating which types of leaves are already available to employees and the conditions for which each leave can be used, including the implications for remote and flexible scheduling opportunities. We also need time to evaluate if we have any policy gaps related to remote and flexible work schedules as we respond to leave requests. We need to be careful not to create policies and procedures that incentivize the wrong behavior. 2.2. This is one that just didn't set well with many of us, given UMB receives significant 200 million plus of funding from Maryland's taxpayers. In addition, a similar proposal was submitted to legislature in January of 2023, but then was withdrawn. So simply put, at this time, UMB leadership doesn't feel that this is the appropriate action to take. So we do not support this.
All right, so thank you, Dawn. We will now move on to our second theme, which was about building an infrastructure to support that lasting change. I talked a lot about sustainability. It was really important for the committee that the work that we did was that first step and wasn't the end of this conversation. And so when we were formed, we were told to think through the changing needs of UMB and develop recommendations that allow for increased flexibility. And that creation of this committee clearly demonstrated an understanding on the part of the university that shifts in workplace trends, embracing workplace flexibility, and ultimately ensuring that the institution is well positioned to deal with future changes. And really, again, the work of this committee was that crucial first step. But if we want to continue to be a national leader, we have to make sure that we are continuing to promote these values of workplace flexibility. And so for us, that took the form of establishing a permanent infrastructure. And so what do I mean when I talk about a permanent infrastructure? I talk about something that is dynamic, that is sustainable, and that continues to address the ongoing needs of evaluating the future of work. And so obviously the creation of this committee was in some way brought on by the pandemic. And so in that way, it was very reactive to what was happening. But the great thing, and I think what a lot of the committee members appreciated, was that it was also proactive in that we were charged with looking forward, charged with figuring out how do we position ourselves to be ready for the next big thing that happens. And so for us, that took the form of recommending kind of two things: a council on the future of work that would include, members from all over the school and that would continue those conversations, and also a full-time position devoted to addressing these issues. And I will pass it back to Dawn.
Okay, again, we want to research both of these. I would say that we're leaning towards supporting them with the deviation to 3.1. The committee recommended that the position mentioned here should report to the Office of EDI, and we didn't agree with that, including Dr. Forbes Beffoud. Identifying funding is also necessary, and finding base budgets across the university is always a difficult task. The additional work for 3.2 is to better define the role and responsibility and the makeup of this committee. So we truly do see getting to a point where we establish a committee like this, but we want to do more research.
Spoiler alert.
Thank you so much. So our third theme is to strengthen employee well-being to improve the human condition. This is a really long section. It's the longest of any of the sections, so we're going to break it up into two parts. So as we've discussed ad nauseum, often the future of work is associated with workplace flexibility, but we looked, as Malika mentioned, at so much more. And this includes employee well-being and, in alignment with our core values, how our employees feel valued here at UMB. So well-being and workplace flexibility really do go hand in hand. Our research found that 45% of people who left their job pointed to a lack of workplace flexibility as the cause for why they left. One of the phrases that I often repeat, my undergraduate education was at Loyola down the street, is cura personalis. It's a Latin phrase used commonly in Jesuit universities and colleges. And what it means is that each person's gifts, challenges, and needs are all equally worthy of care and attention. So Cura Personalis is not just our work at our desks, our academic work, our achievements, but also concern and care for our personal development. That's body, mind, and spirit, and promoting human dignity. At UMB, we often refer to this as a culture of care. And again, that speaks directly to our mission of improving the human condition and to our core values here at UMB. So the first two recommendations that we'll talk about in this section are recommendation 4, which focuses on how we can strengthen, expand, and promote well-being opportunities, resources, and programs. And many of these already exist here at UMB. So that includes making sure that employees feel empowered to take advantage of those resources while at work, and strengthening or finding new ways to recognize employees. Recommendation 5 focuses on fully on-site employees. This is something that's really important to me. I work with police and public safety. You cannot police from home. It just does not work. And many of those who don't have the opportunity to work flexibly are among the lowest paid employees here at UMB. Those are security officers, environmental services staff, facility staff, parking staff, and more. So it's really important to me and to our entire committee that we look at these employees and engage with them to better understand their needs and find a way to provide services and subsidies that could help to bridge the gap between fully on-site employees and those who are remote or hybrid.
Okay, so UMB is already doing both 4.1 and 4.2, but we could be doing them better. We agree and admit that wholeheartedly. In 4.1, we need to target more promotion and utilization of the services we already have. There are services that we offer that people just don't know about. So obviously they don't get utilized. In 4.2, centrally, we want to explore opportunities for improvement, but we also strongly encourage individual departments and units to develop their own employee recognition programs. Some units have, but there are far more that could be implemented. So we are going to be looking to try to strengthen that program at all levels of the organization, employee recognition, I should say, at all levels of the organization. Slide 20. 5.1, often our non-exempt employees, by nature of their jobs, have a difficult time attending listening sessions. And if you're able to read the report, 5.1 really is targeted toward our non-exempt employees. That's why our response is couched in this manner. Supervisors have to take a different approach and make operational adjustments to allow staff to attend these listening sessions. It's part of everybody being able to feel included. There is new supervisor training that's under development by Human Resources that will include the importance of planning for non-exempt employees to attend sessions like this and to encourage them to go. It's one thing to tell them that the session is there, but it's another thing to allow and organize a manner in which they can actually attend and participate. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out our Administration and Finance's own environmental services and operations and maintenance town halls that have been conducted. These units have a significant number of unionized employees, and they're making every effort to have two-way communication in these units. 5.2, there are a number of services and subsidies included in the task force report in the annex. There's so many that we decided we needed to do much more research. We need to explore which of these are already offered. We need to conduct cost analysis for others, and we need to identify the feasibility of supporting this recommendation at that detailed level of the annex. So stay tuned, more work to be done here.
Thank you, Dawn. Recommendation 6 focuses on parking and transportation. We know it's a hot topic. We heard you. It's a whole recommendation in here. Recommendation 7 is to evaluate and provide compensation, benefits, and growth opportunities. UMB has incredible benefits. I'm sure many of us know. I'm pregnant. I'm looking forward to the maternity leave. And, we have great sick time, tuition remission. There's just so many great benefits here. During our committee conversations, we discovered new benefits that none of us knew existed. So how can we ensure that everyone is able to be aware of these benefits and take advantage of them? We also know that cost of living is on the rise, right? And competitive and equitable pay is one of the top things that we heard, as Liz mentioned earlier. So this recommendation 7, focuses on compensation for employees who take on additional responsibilities, transparency for compensation benefits and career growth opportunities, dedicated funding to employees' pursuit of a GED or non-credit training and certifications, and more. And then recommendation 8 rounds out this theme, and that is to foster inclusivity and accessibility to meet the needs of all employees. This encourages equitable services and resources for those with diverse needs, which includes those who identify as having a disability.
So 7.4, we offer several perks that we do not promote. But obviously, we offer several perks that we do promote, but obviously we can do a much better job making the campus aware of them. We have discounts at Lexington Market. That's one of the more recent discounts that's been publicized. The Hippodrome and Everyman Theater offer deeply discounted. Hippodrome offers deeply discounted tickets to production. We have Dell discounts. We have offered a solar program that would allow you to have a discount on your energy utilization if you're a BGE client right now. We hope to keep being able to identify perks that we can offer to our employees. We know that we all have been affected by the rising cost of the daily things that you need to survive on. And we want to be able to bring as many discounts to our employee base as possible. 8.3, this recommendation is already addressed in UMB's diversity strategic plan under the area of focus of experience and climate. Dr. Forbes Bethau, deans and vice presidents are shown as the responsible individuals for making this happen. So there is an accountability component built into this portion of the strategic plan. We support all 3 of these. They're reasonable recommendations. Similar themes to 7.1 and 7.3 were high priority areas for improvement in the staff experience survey. 7.1, we owe more education and training to our supervisors on the existing reevaluation process and staff supplements, as well as when they should be used. You will see in here, we may have done a disservice to some of our supervisors as we've entered this new world of post-COVID and hybrid, and we owe them more training to be able to be successful in this area. 7.3, we need to do a better job communicating existing career advancement opportunities and work to develop more career ladders where it makes sense. Hand in hand with that, we need to expand with the various career coaching and mentorship programs that already exist. And we need to make sure that people know what already exists. 8.1, this is similar to an issue that came up earlier. We do want all employees to engage in campus activities and services. We want supervisors to allow staff members to participate in these things. When it makes sense to do a hybrid event, we do, and we will continue to do. However, there are events like National Night Out that the Public Safety Office puts on every year. That's an in-person event. It can only be put on as an in-person event. There may be other in-person events that deans or vice presidents require attendance for. In those cases, people working remotely need to remember that the requirement to attend applies to them also. Remember, working remotely is a privilege, and hopefully there's a possibility with your supervisor then to flex your schedule from your standard hybrid schedule to be able to still be able to get your remote days in and attend the in-person requirements on campus. All three of these, we want to do more research. Parking and transportation needs to evaluate these proposed models, as well as others that they may find as they examine best practices. They need to identify a model that meets the employees' needs and leaves parking financially sustainable. 7.3, several of us have experience with other employers who do this on an annual basis. We want to be able to share this information. We think it would actually shed light on yet another reason why UMB is a great place to work. However, we still have to figure out how we get information from different systems. Some of the information resides in a state system. Some of it might be in a computer system. So we have to figure out how can we bring what the university is paying for you also by way of benefits over and above your salary. 7.5, we need to find out if tuition benefits can be expanded and who actually makes the decision and what are the financial implications. Don't know if it's a system rule around our tuition benefits, whether it's a state rule. So we have to do more researching. And we need to research if there are things that employees are currently participating in that can be reimbursed, but for which they're not being reimbursed.
All right, so congratulations. You've made it to the halfway point. And so when we look at this theme, really, given the new work landscape, the committee wanted to think through how do we maximize university resources? And so, this ranges from assessing existing UMB space to kind of reimagining how the university communicates. You've heard Don say this, you've heard Karin say this, you're now hearing me say it. We need to do better about connecting our employees with information. And as a librarian, that obviously really resonated with me. And so that's what this recommendation about. So it's really, it's about sustainability in a very tangible context. So as we kind of delve into the recommendations, that'll become clearer. And so recommendation 9 was about space. And we all know that space is a scarce resource here at UMB. And so by conducting an analysis of the existing space, especially following this increase in flexible work, the university can find ways to use that space more effectively. And this obviously has a number of benefits for employees, especially when we think about us as an urban and historic campus. We know that there's a diversity of spaces here. And so that means in some cases we have employees who are maybe working in a more updated space that has all the resources they need to be able to navigate these kind of new working realities. But that also means we maybe have employees who are working in older spaces that require maintenance, require updating. And so recommendation 9, again, space is a very tangible resource. But also information is just as important. So that's where recommendation 10 comes in. And so it really acknowledges that as workplaces, as workforces change, our communication strategies need to evolve. And so maybe previously communications strategies relied on in-person methods, maybe digital displays. If you're not on campus, you're not going to see that. But really, it's about the university making sure that we are looking to be more innovative so that we meet the new and evolving information needs of this kind of new employee landscape. All right, Don.
We are already doing all three of these. 9.1, a review process was started in late 2023. It includes collecting reliable data that will be used to make effective decisions on the best use of space. This effort is led by our Central Real Estate Planning and Space Management Office, working in partnership with CITS and the Executive Director of Bioinformatics in the School of Medicine. The University Campus Vibrancy Initiative is also focused on several of the items that are listed here. So we hope to be able to have results from that space study that we can share and effectively begin to make decisions on how best to use space using that data. And 9.3, we are working on putting break rooms in buildings that currently do not have them. And 10.2, these sessions and opportunities are already happening in many places across campus. And yes, we will continue to do them and hopefully do more of them on topics that you deem relevant.
All right. I heard the audible groan in the room when Liz said that we were halfway.
That was excitement card.
Oh, excitement. Okay, sorry. But we are really coming in towards the end. We have two more high-level themes to go through. And so if you do have questions, start preparing them. You can send them in the chat to Alex as well if you are joining us online. So our fifth theme is enhancing the workplace culture at UMB. And we felt that this culture shift happens not only through education, but by encouraging leadership to continue modeling these behaviors for employees. So this shift requires UMB to commit time, resources, and in some cases, a shift in priorities. Recommendation 11 is to support, promote, and model healthy work habits. What are healthy work habits? What does that mean? That could include providing opportunities to attend wellness events, setting boundaries around leave and workplace flexibility, and the efficient use of time. Our report includes some meaningful ways in which these healthy work habits can be put into practice. And then recommendation 12 focuses on training and resources in support of flexible work. And our research and what we heard from many of you through those focus groups, the listening sessions, and the surveys is that remote work and workplace flexibility can often be misunderstood or mismanaged. So by providing training and resources to supervisors, employees, we think that will help to enhance the workplace culture here at UMB.
Okay, 11.1, 4, and 12.1. All of these recommendations are already supported by the university and related activities are already happening. What I will add is that moving into a hybrid environment was new to most of us when we returned to COVID. Since then, we've seen that the need exists to create a repeated model of mandatory supervisor training that I mentioned earlier. We need to work on how to manage employees in a remote work environment. And again, HR is working on creating this program. We owe it to equip our supervisors, including faculty supervisors of staff, with the tools to be successful in managing in this new work environment. Next slide. 11.1, we support the concept of establishing a culture of meeting efficiency. We don't believe it should be dictated at the university level, but the deans and vice presidents should work through what that culture of meeting efficiency looks like in their respective units of responsibility. 12.2, we're suggesting more research here. This would be a massive undertaking to do 360 evaluations on all supervisors. This would be true of the impact on HR as they would try to coordinate the effort, but also for people asking to complete the 360 evaluation. So we have a PULP program. It's the President's Leadership Program for mid-level managers, and they require 360s to be done. I've often gotten several of them to fill out at the same time. And it's not an easy feat when you might get 3 or 4 that have to be completed in the same window of time. So we wholeheartedly support the intent behind this recommendation, but we need to figure out a more streamlined approach to collect the same information that a 360 might deliver. So we are going to be working to figure that out and find out what other best practices might be out there. 11.5, we don't support this. The university system, thus UMB, offers a rich benefit of various leave time already. And again, employee education may be necessary to make people aware of the different leave programs and the different programs, how they can be used and when. Next slide.
All right. This means I get to say we're at the last theme. So there's just 2 more recommendations left. See how fast that happened? And so for our last 2 recommendations, it really was about recruitment and retention. And so, you know, to kind of go back to something I said earlier, if UMB is to remain an employer of choice, like how do we go about attracting that kind of talent and then keeping that kind of talent? And these recommendations really focus on, you know, simultaneously maintaining the best hiring practices, industry standards, things that we're all used to, but at the same time, learning from everything that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years. And so with recommendation 13, it's about the university developing and implementing recruiting strategies that, again, go back to those industry best practices. And so things like training for hiring managers, disseminating job postings, but finding new and innovative ways to do that. Are we posting in the right places? Are job descriptions interesting enough to attract that kind of talent? As a manager who recently went through about 18 months of just nonstop hiring, this was really important so that other managers going through this, other managers who are looking to fill out their staff, to fill vacancies, are looking at new ways to do that, and the university is supporting them. And then what do we do once we get them, right? You know, when we think about this process, right from day one, when somebody's onboarding, that's when we should be focusing on retaining them. And so, you know, if onboarding is bad, maybe that sets the kind of tone for the rest of that employee's tenure. And so a lot of what we looked at with recommendation 14 was about making sure that employees continue to feel supported, continued to want to make UMB their employer. And so with that, I will hand it over to Dawn.
Okay, 13.3. HR has recently hired a position to identify, track, and report on additional recruitment and hiring process matrix to have data to help target opportunities for improvement across the various HR activities. Malika is so excited. The person that we've hired is very excited to be able to provide this information. And so we think we will be able to give managers more and more information to help them look at critical things as they plan for workforce development within their areas. In 14.3, many UMB areas are already conducting exit interviews. A priority in the HR strategic plan is to formalize and standardize this process so that the data can be benchmarked and tracked, and then action plans can be developed based on that collective body of information. 14.1 and 14.2, we both support. And HR has incorporated the need for both into their current strategic plan. Note some units do conduct stay interviews, but we want again to standardize and formalize the process so that we can look at a collective body of information to be able to drive decisions. So thank you with sticking in there with us to go through so many recommendations and leadership's response. So at this time, it's your opportunity to ask questions, and I will turn it over to Alex.
And for those who want to ask questions in the room, there's a microphone. I was going to say microwave, but that doesn't make sense. Microphone. So yeah.
Well, for the benefit of the people in the room, we have about 100 people online joining you. I have an anonymous question. Person writes, the presentation stated that a supervisor needs to have a very good reason not to allow for flexibility. Let's say you have an employee for whom that trust hasn't been gained due to poor work performance, or even after several disciplinary actions, such as below standard midterm evaluation or annual PDP. Yet they have already passed probation under another supervisor. Is that reason enough not to allow additional flexibility for working at home?
Well, one of the requirements to be eligible to work from home is that you have at least meet standards on your evaluation. So I will let Malika respond more if she wants to, but that is the starting point. Because again, working from home is still being looked at a privilege for right now. It is not something that's automatic. Malika, you want to add anything?
Sure. And I'm sorry, I've been doing a lot of talking and we were kind of rushing at the beginning. But for those who I have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Malika Monger, and I'm the Associate Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer. And I'm so sorry I didn't say that at the beginning. I think that you're exactly right, Dawn. I would add, there may be some other factors that are not listed, right? So I don't want to make a blanket statement and say, yes, that's enough for them to not work, right? Know that that should be a conversation between the supervisor and employee, right? And I think that one of the things that we're hearing today was that we're not mandating remote work. That wasn't even one of the recommendations that came from the committee, because there are so many factors that have to be looked at, a lot of which Liz had went over. And so I think I will say just very clearly that does need to be a conversation if there are factors, and the supervisor needs to have that latitude to say, yep, I know that you're coming from a different area. You have a new position, you're transferring. Let's talk about what that means. And if there is a necessity to bring that employee in and have them working more in the office for whatever reason that may be as determined by the supervisor, that absolutely needs to happen based upon that conversation and the work performance. So I do want to just put that out there. So thank you for that.
All right, before we take more online questions, does anyone in the room have a question? Raise your hand and come right up. There you go.
Hi, my question is kind of the other side of that. So whenever these listening sessions happen, I find that a lot of people talk in between sessions because it brings up a lot of concerns, doubts, excitement. And so one thing that I've heard is about employees before these sessions were launched being told, hey, we want to bring everybody back 5 days a week. And one of the recommendations is to eventually have somebody in a position that could evaluate such statements and help mediate those conversations. In the interim, if there is an employee or a department that is feeling like, hey, we've been doing our work hybrid or remote, we've been doing fine, haven't had any complaints, have gotten good reviews. Why is this mandate being put in place, whether it's 5 days or even just any change to the current status? Where can they go to seek support, especially when oftentimes, if they don't feel comfortable asking a question in this session, it's hard to bring that up with your supervisor, or to feel like if you go to HR, I'm not trying to go over your head, or that's not the environment they're trying to create. But how do you create a process where there does have to be some sort of justification, explanation, and maybe if my manager is the one who's telling me the explanation, I may not be hearing that fully. It might be a little hard to believe if you don't have a third person there that can mediate that conversation.
You're on mute, Dawn.
Let me start, and I'm going to ask Malika to follow up. You said that the person that we're talking about hiring or that's been recommended would be the mediator. That's not really the role of that position. That position is going to be focused on, are we continuing to look into the future and continuing to respond and involve, and what are some of the needs that are, or what are the evolving changes in workforce issues that are coming on and keeping us proactively looking forward. They would be a staff person to the committee that would be set up on future of work. They would hold people accountable, checking to see, are the vice presidents and deans doing the things that are supposed to be done? And I guess I would add, you listed a lot of things, but again, things that we are charging managers and supervisors to take into consideration is our commitment to vibrancy, community, etc. So I hope people hear when we say that that is part of what's also going into the decisions when managers and supervisors are making those decisions, and we need to hold them accountable to explaining those decisions. Now, if those things are in place and it doesn't work, I'm going to ask Malika to explain what would person's next steps be.
Absolutely. And I had heard you say at the very beginning when you first started that there might be some mandate coming down the pipeline, whether it's 05. Know that that's not coming from us as at the administration level. And I do want to be really careful. So the term and the phrase having to have a very good reason, and those decisions based upon operational needs at the schools and units, those will be communicated. Those are communicated from the senior leadership of those schools and units, right? And they may provide their rationale, but to use the term very good, that may not, and that's very subjective because what's me may not be very good to you, right? And I do agree with you that sometimes employees, they don't hear it, right? Even if that communication, and I say they don't hear it because we get the concerns and we know that some of our deans and our vice presidents, they're having these conversations with people, but we always hear, oh, we didn't hear anything, or they hear it the way that they want to hear it, right? And so know that that information is coming and that we are not in on those decisions. That is coming from your deans and VPs, right? However, to Dawn's point, when you feel that there are employees that they're not hearing it, right? And again, it's not a one-on-one conversation, but if they're not hearing it and they feel like there needs to be some facilitated conversations, I'm going to put a plug in. We have our workplace mediation services where they can bring both employees to the table, employees and supervisors, where that communication is sometimes crossed. If you feel like there is issues as an employee, you feel like there are issues between whether that's the communication and I'm not understanding, you are always welcome and free to reach out to your employee and labor relations representative. And all of our schools and units have them. You can, it's actually listed on our HR website. And if you're not quite sure, you're welcome to send me an email and I'll direct you because they can also provide that information. I know that you said you don't want to often go over your, if by HR, you're going over your supervisor's head. And that's not the case if you're just calling as an employee to ask a question. Right. We may in turn say, hey, we heard this question and it may not be from, tell me your name.
Yeah.
Iyama?
Fiona.
Fiamma. Okay, we're not going to throw you under the bus and say, okay, we heard this, question from Fiamma. What we may say is, hey, we just heard a concern. We want to give you the heads up. We may say something like that to the supervisor or to the deans because we want to keep the lines of communication open as well.
Thank you.
And if notwithstanding all of that, you still worry that HR may throw you under the bus, which they won't.
No.
Because we have a very capable and professional staff. But you really want to have a semi-confidential, private conversation. We have also as another resource, the university ombuds, which is someone who is not connected to HR or any other departments that you could go and have a conversation with. And so long as you're not informing the ombuds or sharing with the ombuds anything that would constitute reportable behavior that the ombud has to report, like somebody really violating university policy and state law and so on, that conversation is between you and the ombuds. And the ombuds is a good resource for helping you think through, well, who should I speak to next? Is HR the next best step? Or should I work with my supervisor through the employee workplace mediation services program? And so that is yet another resource available to all faculty and staff at the university.
And thank you for that, Roger. So if people don't know who that ombudsman is, tell me first and last name, Roger. And if they were to try to search for it online, what would they be putting? Ombudsman's office?
Yeah, so his name is Brian Goddard, and he actually reports to me in his role as the university ombuds, but he has a significant level of independence in that role. And if you want to find him, it's on the university's website. If you just go into the search box and type university ombuds, it will pop up.
All right, one of our online attendees has emailed a question. It touches on some of the same issues that we were just talking about, but with a recommendation. He writes, as a dedicated UMB employee and parent of young children, I found that the current remote work policies to be inflexible and detrimental to my professional performance and personal well-being. During the pandemic, I proved that my work can be done fully remotely, yet I'm now only allowed one telework day per week, dictated by my manager, who is firmly opposed to remote work. This rigid policy has forced me to burn through leave and make difficult choices between work and family obligations, even though 90% of my work is still being conducted online. I strongly believe that remote work arrangements should be determined through an individualized process that involves input from multiple stakeholders rather than relying on the judgment of just one person. I propose the creation of a remote work review committee that assesses each employee's situation objectively, considering factors such as job responsibilities, productivity, collaboration needs, and personal circumstances. And by implementing a more inclusive and flexible approach, UMB can create policies that are equitable, responsive to the diverse needs of our workforce, and foster a culture of trust and accountability. This will ultimately boost morale, performance, and retention.
Malika, would you respond to that?
Really?
I'll come in the end if you need me to.
Sure. So let me say this. I absolutely agree with an individualized stance or a process, right? However, we have 7,500 employees. If we started down the road of trying to look at, even with the review committee, of trying to look at every single employee individually, it would be probably more than a full-time job with an entire office doing so, right? There is no way that we can use that much of an individualized approach. One of the things that we have done, we had a work group that looked at, different job families and the suitability for remote work. But even in that, so we're saying, absolutely, can these different positions and these different job families be remote, have remote work? They absolutely can. But it's also, again, that has to be under the direction and discretion of the vice presidents and of the deans. So, but when you say one person making the decision, I absolutely, with all confidence, know that because I've heard some of the conversations from the deans and VPs when they are assessing and reviewing remote work, whether it's for their department, for their units, that is not based upon it's being made in a silo. And this is my opinion as Malika, as the AVP. I've heard conversations around the table when the VPs are pulling their leadership teams together, pulling the supervisors together to hear their feedback and then making a decision. I do understand that the decision does not always feel comfortable or right for all employees, but even at our school levels and our unit levels, the responsibility and the weight of making those decisions, I know that is not something that they take lightly, and it is made. And so what we ask is that, through this process, because we hear you, we really do. And that justification and that rationale is very important. And so that's what we're asking, that continues to be communicated from our senior level leaders. So I will stop there and just, because I could go on and on about it, but I will stop there and give Dawn and Roger an opportunity to chime in.
I intentionally asked Malika to speak first so that I could make sure what I say it's not intended to sting, but it may feel uncomfortable with my response. Everything that you just listed was strictly from the employee standpoint. And therein lies why we have charged our deans, vice presidents, and supervisors when taking into consideration the things that UMB as an anchor institution has to pay attention to. If every employee came and said those things and came up with a great justification in their mind why they should not be working on campus, the economic infrastructure around the campus would implode. Lexington Market needs people there to buy from them. The vendors along Lexington need people to buy from them. As an anchor institution, we need the vitality on this campus for our neighbors, but also for our students. Students come to campus, they need to see people on campus. So we can't We have to have a different perspective. So we care about employee well-being, but we have to have a different perspective as these decisions are being made. And I'm going to ask you to try to walk a mile in a supervisor's shoes. They're responsible for certain things being done. How would you bring somebody from a different unit and put them on a committee who knows absolutely nothing about the operation of your unit, making a decision about whether your employees should work from campus or not? I think that's not a fair burden to put on supervisors who we ultimately hold accountable for the work that comes from their units. Roger?
Thank you for that. I concur with everything that has been said as it relates to the aspect of the comment that speaks about putting together another board, body, group to evaluate these things. I am not in favor of that for the following reason. To the extent that we are adopting these recommendations and we're trying to figure out through this process what remote work would look like, I would encourage anyone that in that individuals or any scenario where you feel as though, notwithstanding what we're articulating, that the process isn't working, to use already existing processes that we have in place for grieving an issue. We have well-established policies and procedures in place for doing just that. Remote work will become one of those issues that people will have grievances around. And so instead of creating a separate body to do that, let's use our established procedures to manage those issues, because we have experience doing that. So it's not that I disagree that an employee might have a grievance.
Right.
Absolutely. I have a different point of view and disagree with a determination from a supervisor. That happens. And I agree that an employee should have some avenue in order to grieve that. And I don't think the avenue we create is by creating yet another group or body or pathway for them to do that for the reasons Dawn just mentioned. Know what group, and we won't support a group of folks who may not have the necessary expertise substituting their judgment for that of a dean or a vice president or a supervisor in an area.
We have questions over on this side of the room, so I'm going to give Brittany a moment to get over to you so that everyone can hear you. Brittany's getting her workout today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I have two questions. The first one is, did you consider a pilot program where you would have a 10-hour day for 4 days? And the second question is, would you reconsider the leave bank? Because I'm thinking about the employees that have so much time that they would rather donate it than lose it.
Malika, how about I take the first part, you take the second part? So there are already in units that flexibility. There are areas that are working that may be allowing their employees to work 4 10-hour days. So that's something that already exists, that's already feasible. When we talk about a flexible work schedule, though, that's one of the examples. And again, it's already in place in some places. So that would be a conversation with an employee and their supervisor about the feasibility of doing something like that.
Sure. And the second part about the leave bank, I think that, if we didn't have anything, part of the issue is that there are lots of leave programs that already exist that our employees don't know about. And we actually had a conversation. I have counterparts at other USM institutions, and we actually had a conversation about this because we were going down the route of, should we consider that? It's a lot of administrative work, but it was like, it's worth it if we can do it for our employees. So no, that's absolutely something we care about. But one of the things that the system actually came back and said was, you would not believe the hundreds of hours that go unused with the leave programs that we already have with the state. So that just told me we can hold on even thinking about a leave bank and make sure that we are promoting and making our employees aware of the leave options that we already have. So that's what we really want to focus on, because again, we want our employees to take, especially we've heard some situations where employees who might be new, have emergency situations with their families that come up and they don't have it, right? Or like you said, employees who have lots of leave who would be willing to donate. And just even that process of when we would have to figure out how to navigate that, because we do have collective bargaining agreements that we have to work under. There's the policy piece, there's the USM piece. But no, if we get to the point where we're like, you know what, we have exhausted we are not one of those institutions who are not using our leave. We are absolutely using our programs. That would be something that we would explore. But the first step is, can we promote what we already have and get the utilization rate of those programs up and running? So thank you for that question.
So I wanted to piggyback on the conversation earlier. And Alex, I think you said someone emailed in and they gave their example for working at home 5 days, kid issues. And there is a lot of bias against childless employees on this campus where, and it's, I think, across all schools and all units, the childless employees are often expected to cover for their counterparts with children. And where has that come up, and how can we deal with that?
So I thank you for bringing that up, because that hasn't been my experience. And this is the first time that I'm hearing something like that is going on. Again, we absolutely, and you're saying this from the perspective of, employees seeing this from employees and having to cover. So I would absolutely encourage, as an employee, if this is what you're seeing happen, to have a conversation first with your supervisor, right? Because, maybe as a supervisor, I don't recognize that, oh, okay, let me, now that you brought it to my attention, I do notice that, but sometimes we don't notice, right? Because we're in the role of, yes, I have someone who I'm trying to provide flexibility to, and not at the expense of my other employees, but that means we may have to shuffle the deck and get some things done. And I'm not realizing internally the impact that that's having on my other employees. So I absolutely would encourage you to talk to your supervisor about that. And again, if you don't feel comfortable in talking to your supervisor, all the different resources that we've offered here today, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up.
Hi, I had a question about, it was 7.1, which was like the advisement to supervisors regarding compensation for inadequate staffing levels. Do we have a sense of how that's determined? Is that like current vacancies or positions that are being advocated to be created to expand staffing and operational capacities?
I'm sorry, what did 7.1 say? I shouldn't I? But it's a lot about staffing in there. Okay, so 7.1 is ensure employees are advised and or fairly compensated when taking on additional responsibilities. So, okay, so what is your question, Dan, around that?
Because I think when I read the slide, it talked about like inadequate staffing levels. I just didn't know like how that would be determined, if there was current staffing vacancies or employees or supervisors advocating for additional capacities because of the strain.
Okay, so I'm sorry, and I didn't read the whole thing. It does say fairly compensated when taking on additional responsibilities due to inadequate staffing levels. Would one of you all like to talk about, go into detail about kind of what that meant for the committee in looking at that recommendation?
Sure.
And then I'll add on to it. I mean, since it was your recommendation, because what you really want to know is what the inadequate staffing levels mean, right? I mean, I can say from HR standpoint.
We'll do our best. So one of the things that we repeatedly heard is when there's inadequate staffing levels is the term that we're using, right? So you know, there's numerous unfilled positions or just a strain on staffing, and a lot of other employees are required to pick up the slack. So this spoke to that. If an employee is taking on a lot of extra work, is there a way to compensate them for that extra work?
And our response was, there is a reevaluation process that all supervisors may not know about, all employees may not know about. And so HR already has that process in place. I'll let you please continue, Malika.
Yep. So one of the things that I want to say is I think as supervisors, we've all been around the table where we have vacancies and it happens, right? And we've been given like 2 weeks and a person leaves. And so we end up having to reassign duties. I think when I had one person leave, I had to reassign duties to like 3 different people, right? Just to get the work done. And so there is that where it's all hands on deck. Yep, you have extra work, right? The expectation is that that's not a long-term solution. And I am putting that work on people, or maybe if I took that one job and said, I'm going to give it to one person, and now another person is just doing 2 jobs in one, right? The expectation is that that's not a long-term solution when we have inadequate staffing levels. So of course, if that becomes part of the person's work, then absolutely you want to talk to the compensation team about a reevaluation. Our expectation is that you don't have 2 people or one person doing a 2-person job, right? And so we're able to, if we hear that from employees, like we actually had earlier in the week at one of our town halls where there was someone who said that she had been doing the work of 2 people for a really long time. And when she kept asking for, when is the position going to be filled? She never got a response. And then there was also okay, well, let's go to HR and reclass the position. And then that happened when we agreed that it should be reclassed, but then that never happened. So if you're in a position where you're asking your supervisor, you've gotten HR involved, and we're thinking that it's taken care of, right? And so you're always welcome to come back to HR if you have further questions about that, because we do want to make sure that we're not overburdening when a person is taking it on, again, long-term, and it's suddenly a part of their duties and there's no plan in place to fill the position. We can work with the supervisor on those options. Again, I do want to reiterate that there's oftentimes when people go out the door and it is an all hands on deck thing, and we're forced as supervisors to make those kinds of decisions in divvying out the work.
All right, we have another anonymous question from the virtual audience. Person writes, are there base guidelines for determining how many remote days are allowed for a position? For example, as a person who has 0 to 1 in-person meetings and no customer facing, would that person be required to be in the office no more than 2 days a week? Someone who has 2 to 4 in-person meetings and or customer facing would be required to be in the office 3 or more days. While I understand the vibrancy and community, I feel that some managers may be determining days in the office based on personal feelings about remote work.
You want me to take that first? So let me just say, one of the things, and I think it's a good question, it's a valid question, are we going to provide those guidelines, right? So know first that, the task force has done a great job of coming up with the recommendations. They back it up with lots of data, their recommendations. And so one of the things, and we gave our deans and VPs an opportunity to respond. And so one of the things we'll be taking back, we've heard great comments and great questions, but we haven't had the opportunity to flush out what that means with our deans and VPs, right? We've said, make sure that you communicate. We haven't said, are there criteria or are there things that across the board we want to make sure that we're looking at? Again, staying away from the individualized, because there's no way that I can say, even for all 40 of my team members that I'm going to have 40 different types of remote work policies or practices in place, right? But I think that we will be taking this conversation back But I cannot say definitively whether we'll say, because again, remember, I think we started the conversation with it is at the discretion of the deans and VPs based upon operational needs and a whole lot of factors that we're looking at, right? And I know that we've had that discussion, but there has not been anything firmly in writing to say that this is what we will do. And I can't guarantee you that that will actually happen to say that this is the criteria. That will be the conversation with the dean and VP group. Roger, Don, did you all want to add anything? No, you good? You good?
Another questioner sort of follows up on that. Please, if you have questions in the in-person audience here, raise your hand so that Brittany knows to come to you. Person writes, how will directions be communicated to the deans and vice presidents? Will there be any subsequent follow-ups?
So I think that maybe I thought I just mentioned that we're gonna, and when you say communication, as far as in communication on the recommendations themselves or just.
I think that's the implication, yeah.
Okay, so on the recommendations themselves. So there will be follow-up because remember, and we started out with, you know, part of the responsibility of the sub work group was to, do we support, not support, more research needed, or already supporting, right? So then it becomes, okay, so where do we go from here? So one of the things that we will do is we have to have that conversation. We have to pull a plan together. You know, I think one of the recommendations called out the infrastructure, right? We have to talk about what that means, how it's supported, if it's funded, and then how we are very thoughtful in our planning around the things that we are committed to doing in supporting the recommendations, or where more research was needed. And the plan will then determine how we then follow up with the communication back to our UMB community. I will say there will be further communication because there was lots of more research needed, right? There was lots of already supporting, but we need to improve. We need to strengthen in this area. So how are we going to do that? So we absolutely will be following up with communication, but how that communication is determined will be something that we will discuss in our plan. And go ahead. No, go ahead.
I want to make sure that the following isn't lost on everyone listening and everyone participating. University leadership includes the president, the deans, and the vice president. And all of the recommendations that have been presented today, the responses back that you heard from Dawn, the responses to the questions you're hearing from myself, is developing collaboration with the deans, vice president, and the president. So you take all this feedback and it goes back to the Executive Leadership Council that includes that group. And they all have a say in figuring out how we move forward on this. And so we would not have gotten to this point without the full support, engagement, and participation of university leadership. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that there's some group somewhere, maybe the president, the provost, Dawn, Roger, that's going to say to the deans and vice president, here are instructions, go do this. They are partners in co-creating how we move forward. That's how we function at the university. And we would not have gotten to this point where the majority of recommendations have been accepted and embraced without the full engagement of the deans and vice president. So I'm very optimistic that wherever we settle, and after taking all the feedback into consideration, that the deans and the vice presidents and their supervisors will honor the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
And I'm sorry, I would be remiss. I know, Judy and Peter, you all have been on the work group, so feel free to chime in if we're missing anything. Okay. I just didn't want you to feel left out,
All right, Brittany's heading across the room, so just give her a moment.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm actually quite curious if there were any recommendations on the for the task force or on behalf of the task force that focus around evaluations of jobs, not in terms of compensation or even physical work, but to help jobs integrate new technology so that the workforce is evolving with AI and so on, and what sort of efforts will be made at least to help employees develop from that perspective, develop themselves and develop the jobs onwards.
I know there was one.
The answer is yes. Just give me a minute to try and find it. And can we circle back to you in a few minutes? Okay.
In the meantime, go to Peter Murray. He has some. Right, Peter?
Good afternoon. I'm Peter Murray. As Roger and Malika have mentioned, was part of the subgroup to work on these recommendations. Just a couple of remarks. One is I'd like to give a lot of credit to President Gerald and the two executive co-chairs, Dr. Ward and Dr. Rhodes, for having such an inclusive and comprehensive process. And to all the employees who filled out the survey, just a great response rate. And as we're hearing from Malika, the hundreds of pages to analyze the response and come up with the recommendations. It was, quite frankly, rather easy for the small subgroup to go through this and to approve most of the recommendations that were provided. But you're making a great point about AI and the future of technology and the future of work. That's something that Dr. Ward and I talked about this morning, as a matter of fact, that we need to figure out how to handle this really explosion of AI into our lives. And it's been around for a long time. AI has been around a long time, but it's really getting down to the individual level, right? To how we handle it going forward. What are the governance? What are the policies? What are the procedures? How can we make it work for us as an opportunity going forward? But Dr. Ward, any other comments?
No, it's an excellent question.
Yep.
It is an excellent question, and one thing that it's making clear, this work around the future of work comes out of the pandemic, and we're talking about remote work. But the committee and the working group and the task force and the whole initiative is appropriately called the future of work. At some point, the conversation might evolve and will likely evolve away from just talking about remote work. It might be talking about how we work AI and what jobs might become AI-enhanced jobs and what the implications of that might mean for people doing those jobs. And so this is going to be an ongoing conversation about the future of work. Today, it's about the ability to work remotely. Tomorrow, which is not in the too distant future, it's going to be about how AI impacts any number of the roles and positions we have here at the institution and what that might mean for the university. So it's a really good question.
And I do want to just commend the task force because I think that they had the foresight to look in the future and say, we know that this is not it, which is why one of their recommendations was to create a president's council for future of work, right? Because if you think about future of work, it is going to continue to evolve. And the things that we're focused on, I know the conversation has been around remote work. We had two other areas. I just want you all to remember that. It was not only remote work, it was employee well-being and employee value proposition, even though we're focused on remote work. But absolutely that what we are doing will continue to evolve. And that will be the importance of, having that council, that we're able to keep that conversation going, that you all are holding us accountable to the things that we said that we are supporting and following up with you. So thank you. Did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sort of? Oh, okay, go. I'm sure it's not pointedly what he asked, but related. How about related?
So really, the entirety of recommendation 10 is, I kind of talked about it broadly, connecting people with information, but there's some practicalities there that go with that, right? Do people have the technology they need? So we talk about communication channels, right? Some of the issues we have just across campus with different schools. Anybody from the School of Medicine here? Right? Can't talk, it's so hard to work with them on Teams or some of these other kind of platforms that we all utilize every day. So not directly, but it was really about making sure people have the resources to thrive, which could include technology training, which can include different types of technology. even peppered throughout it, like some of the space stuff, right? This idea that we have people in spaces that aren't conducive to hybrid work, that can't have video conferences like what we're having now. That's another kind of piece of it as well. So I would say it was actually kind of peppered throughout these recommendations, but most specifically, if you look at recommendation 10, that's probably where it's the most explicit.
But you have to look at the 168 page.
That was just easier.
Malika, since you mentioned well-being,
Okay.
another part of the recommendations, an unnamed staff Senate member who couldn't be here today asked me to pass along this recommendation. Okay, it's okay, don't worry. She
That
asked,
wouldn't happen to be the one that I mentioned earlier, but.
no.
Okay.
I'm not gonna tell you that. I said unnamed. She asks, what about wouldn't it be a good idea to provide free membership to the gym? Because it would enhance our well-being, our health, and it would provide people with just that much more positive feeling about coming to work. And there's a sign in the gym that says you're one workout away from a good attitude.
So I absolutely think that would be a great idea. There were actually quite a few subsidies and programs. If you look in the 168 page document, they had, was it 2 pages worth? 2 pages worth of subsidy? Yeah. Exactly, right. Where they actually brainstormed and came up with different ideals. And that was one of the things that, I mean, we said that we support it, but we need more research, right? Because when we talk about the feasibility. Yes, so that was recommendation 5, to provide alternate services and subsidies to support fully on-site employees. So we absolutely support that. It's what's the feasibility? How can we fund it? How do we do it? I do want to say, we have had discounted classes. We offered that through the rec center for employees. And I've actually been told that the utilization of those classes have been very low. So one of the things, how about I just take the responsibility for it? I'll take it. We will do a better job at promoting those programs that we do have. Because again, there's a lot. We have a lot of great programs and opportunities and resources. And what I'm coming to find is that a lot of times our employees, our supervisors don't know what it is that we offered. Like we are, even with our child care grant program, I think we had 140 applications this year and was able to award 86 to help parents fund child care. So, and we want to continue to build on that, but even just looking at, again, just the feasibility of that, because we absolutely do support it. And we are going to be revamping our website because we also understand that people don't often know where to find the resources and the programs, right? So we're going to be revamping our program to make it easier for our employees to find that information. So thank you, anonymous person.
I will pass that along. Another virtual attendee is going to challenge your memorization of the report, okay? She's asking about recommendation 8, response 8.2. I probably don't need to say anything more about that. You know exactly what it is, but she writes that the response says that implementing universal design principles is an unnecessary burden on the university and dilutes the bandwidth of the campus to address individual accommodations for employees. Could someone speak to the research that was done into this response or explain the rationale behind it in greater detail?
That's a Peter response.
So, did he just leave?
Did he really?
Yeah. So let me read the rationale. So it says, so the 8.2 was to develop and provide training and materials for UMB applications, services, and devices that would benefit those with disabilities, including implementing universal design principles for all trainings, websites, and designs. We actually said that we support it. So we said we support it and that we further support implementation of ADA compliant trainings, websites, and designs, which may include certain universal design principles. As stated, implementing universal design principles for all applications and trainings would create a greater unnecessary responsibility for UMB to address every system and application, thereby diluting bandwidth and resources away from addressing the needs of individual employees. So the person, and let me just make sure I'm clear, is the person challenging the statement that says, making it a greater unnecessary responsibility for UMB to address every system and application? Is that what they're?
I think she wants to know what research led to that conclusion, or what's the rationale and sort of more detail for why that was the determination.
Malika, let me try to answer, and we will somehow, somewhere get Peter's much better articulated response to the campus.
All right.
But the problem with the question, as Peter saw it, was that it said design principles for all training websites and designs. That all word, that's what he meant in terms of unnecessary burden. There are specific things that can be done and drill down to specific applications that would make more sense to approach it that way versus saying all. And that's as best I can articulate it. And we'll get Peter to get a response out, but supported it. It's just the way we worded the rationale. It was more feasible to actually do.
Hi, I'd just like to share that in those 168 pages included the appendices, correct, right? And there are a couple of really key items in those appendices, and one of which is a summation of a report that was created by one of our schools that used an outside consultant to analyze the services and programs for students and employees around disability issues. That's a shout out to Dr. Postmus and the School of Social Work who did that. And so that was included in one of the appendices. I really encourage people to look at that. That was the intent behind the universal design recommendation.
Any other questions, Alex?
All right, another anonymous question. Orientation should provide more information than just a high-level overview. A high-level overview, she writes, are for people who have a base understanding of benefits, which many people don't. This is a missed opportunity to mention more benefit offerings, also clarifying the differences between central HR and department HR, and which one to go to for different questions.
Thank you for that. I know that one of the things that we've tried to do specifically with benefits in our onboarding, and let me just say, so onboarding is our kind of intake that all employees are required to go through, right, on their first day. And benefits is so like dense and comprehensive. If you have been on our website and you've read about the supplemental retirement programs, the health insurance offerings, it's a lot, right? So at our onboarding, and because we do have a full day packed, if you notice, there really aren't a lot of breaks. It's a full day packed of all of the things that we're saying are super important for new employees to know coming in the door. I do agree with you. So when we talk about there should be more information about the benefits. So one of the things that we've done, we've created a benefits video that actually helps people understand the difference between the supplemental retirement programs, right? We've put a chart on our website, again, that distinguishes between the health insurance programs so that people can see it. And that is actually talked about at the onboarding day 2. What we also say during that session is that if you have questions, Emily and her team are always willing to have follow-up. And when I do tell you they will have follow-up sessions. You can schedule individualized appointments with the benefits team. And I also agree with you. One of the things that we are working on, and we try to say it actually during the onboarding sessions, is pertaining to what we do at Central HR versus what you go to your school or unit HR for. So we are doing much more of that because I've heard that comment when we talk about some of our processes, right? When we think about hiring, there's some misunderstandings about what people go to central HR for versus their school HR. So as we are revamping our hiring process, we're going to be talking about that. But point well made. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, remember, if you have a question, raise your hand so we know to come to you. Don't want to ignore people in the room. But another virtual question. The audience member writes, I appreciate Dawn's and Malika's responses to questions about employees taking on additional tasks when inadequate staffing exists. But I want to challenge them to go a little further in their response. UMB does not offer a pay policy for that. And a response of sometimes we all have to work all hands on deck is not landing with the campus. The reality is that vacancies exist and someone is doing that work, sometimes for several months or longer. I think you keep getting these questions because employees have already asked their supervisor and HR representatives for compensation when they're working multiple jobs. I would like to challenge you to seriously consider developing a policy for additional pay when employees are completing work while vacancies exist.
So noted. Because that is not the first time, I'm getting my pen so I can make sure I write this down. It's not the first time that we've heard that. And I would just respond and say, if there are perimeters or guidelines, if we need to look at our policy different, we will absolutely do that because again, I think that I've heard that concern and we want to be fair to our employees. So challenge accepted. We'll look into that.
I wholeheartedly agree with Malika. We've made changes this past year to a pay administration policy, so the groundwork has been laid. We can look at that.
There aren't any other online questions, so this is your chance.
I just wanted to make a quick plug for the person that was talking about the reduced gym prices, that in addition to UMB benefits, we also have a lot of benefits through the health insurance through UMB. And so Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, you can get reduced gym membership, free access to Noom, nutritionists that I pay, I think $15 per session for. No, I don't pay anything per session for them. So definitely look into the benefits that you get through the health insurance if you're getting your health insurance through UMB, because they have a lot of things to offer.
Can I tag on to that? I recently had my physician basically write a script that I needed to do exercise. And if you have the flexibly scheduled dollars pulled from your check, you can use those dollars then with the script from your doctor to pay for it. So there's ways to do things.
Are you saying to tell your doctor to write that you need to do exercise?
Well, I told my doctor they did, and mine is being covered.
Thank you for that. And the flex spending account, that's what you're referring to, right?
I think we might have a good final question. Someone writes, is there a launch date when everyone will be informed of the final future of work announcement?
What do you mean announcement? What does that mean?
I'm reading what's written, but I'm guessing that she means, the complete report. Will it be released to I mean, I know it's released in these sessions, but is it going to be published for everyone to read the final report?
So both reports have been published.
Oh, okay.
So both the recommendations from the task force, so as well as the dean and VP response to the report as well. So if you go to the Future of Work website, those reports are on there. If she was alluding to final report as far as, we had quite a bit of need more research, that kind of follow-up, we will be coming back and determining that, and we'll publish something based on that. Absolutely.
You should read it. It's great.
It is. And let me say this, because I think when I say 168 pages, and some of that is the appendices, some of the attachments, but just let me say, it really allows you to understand the perspective of the task force and why they made the recommendations. And the justifications and rationales that they provide for each one of those bullet points, I mean, they have summarized it nicely. It won't feel like you're reading a 168-page report. It's an awesome report. Very well done. Yes, for you. Oh, you got it. She's coming.
For those of us that have been tasked on reading the 168-page report, do we have a forum where to ask follow-up questions on that report?
Would you all like to take those questions?
I think Elisa would love to.
Well, there is still the email. So on the website are the two reports and the email address. So it's the future of work at umaryland.edu. And so those, if you ask any questions or more information, that email inbox is live. It will continue to be and will be there'll be people looking at it.
Thank you for that, Elisa. I forgot that we had the email out there. So if you have any further comments, questions, or concerns, you're welcome to use the Future of Work email address to contact us. And again, please don't expect like we're going to get back to you like in 12 hours. I mean, sometimes those mailboxes are inundated, but know that we may not get back to you individually, especially if it requires some research or especially if it requires us to follow up and in discussion with our broader plan, but know that we will address it. So thank you. And thank you for that. Is that it?
That's it.
Well, Dawn, Roger, any final comments?
I'd just like to say that this has been a very collaborative process. And I appreciate the engagement of the campus on this topic and know that it is not done. We have, as a leadership team, have the responsibility for developing the action plan that goes along with all those things that we have research on or that we've agreed to do and support. So there are going to be many more conversations and many more actions behind this. So thank you all.
And ditto to that, I've been pleased at the level of engagement from the outset to the very end. And this is not the end, but the end of this particular phase of the project. People showed up in person, so thank you. People showed up online, even on opening day, and so thank you. But that just speaks to the importance of the issue, and you have our assurance that everything that we hear, all the feedback that's provided is going to be taken very seriously, and you will see significant progress here in this area going forward.
Thank you all.